A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. That is so often said, but is actually remarkably true. If you're doing well, having fun, and enjoying yourself, that's awesome. But as soon as you start to dump on others, spread toxicity, ridicule, and bring others down, or use FF logs or a parse as a ladder to stomp down others, that's when that becomes a problem. And sadly lately, especially in some spheres and with some people, it's become really quite vulgar or repulsive even, where I myself can tell you I will not engage in a lot of these communities. To be clear, I have no horse in this race. I already have my own static of like-minded people that I genuinely love to be around, and I'd count all of them as friends. But in terms of parsing toxicity, there are a ton of examples that I could unfortunately list, but one in particular I want to focus on here. And it's one that unfortunately shocked me quite a bit. I have the love of my life, someone that I genuinely hope to marry with and have an amazing life with, my boyfriend co-healing with me in the static, and people have been saying horrific things like they play white mage because they have no brain, because screw playing something that you just enjoy because we can't have that, or that because he's not parsing orange, he will never make it in Dragon Song's Reprise, or ridiculing this or that. Just baseline stupid for obvious reasons, and I'm not going to insult your intelligence by going through that. But relevant to this video is it is additionally even more stupid than that baseline, because I am literally close friends to actually quite a few people who have cleared the Epic of Alexander Ultimate called T, that they have cleared over 5 times with gray parses. The entire idea of criticizing healers during progression, we're not talking farm, we're talking specifically progression, and farm still has a lot of hurdles to go over itself, but during progression, criticizing your healers for parse numbers is stupid. It's stupid, and I'm going to save that discussion for later in this video because there is actually more to go through before that, but you can always tell who has never actually fresh progged a fight on healer based on how bad their take is. My point is, Parsing in 14 has become significantly worse in a lot of ways than the community has really been speaking about, and yeah, I'm not oblivious to the videos. Why do you think I made a channel? Because I don't watch 14 videos? Please. To be clear, I'm not interested in rehashing what others have said. I don't like that repackage someone else's talking points thing, because I both agree and sometimes I really do disagree with some points. One thing that I agree with that isn't spoken about loudly enough that I think does need more traction is that a lot of the amazing parses that you see online is purely because of the gear, because someone got best in slot early on. Maybe they took a week off of work, maybe they're unemployed, for whatever reason they were able to get best in slot really quickly. And this is really enabled because FF Log's formula doesn't discern between item levels. There's a whole lot like how do you track item level, like it's not as easy of a solution as one might get, and I want to state that clearly. But this doesn't change the fact that if you have best in slot gear, it is a tremendously large advantage over most casual players, which makes up even the bulk of the raiding community that raids say 6 hours a week. People are comparing these numbers unironically, just it comes off as very uninformed or intentionally being biased, usually to their own advantage since they benefited in some way from the skewed structure. Maybe they're trying to beat someone in an argument, which is, we're still arguing on the internet. My fucking god, how? They're trying to use it as some kind of leverage and really take advantage of this skewed structure. Parsing until you have best in slot is the dumbest activity you can do. Sadly, I do see, and I know this is a bit of tangent, but sadly, I do see a lot of people that are like 590 or 592 or 591 gear, and they're comparing themselves to someone that has a best in slot raid weapon, and it's like, oh, my FF logs is only showing like green or something, I'm so bad at this game, and I'm like, you're still using a 580 weapon, are you kidding? Getting back to the point, as an example of something that I actually disagree with that has become very commonly said, is being greedy with a melee GCD is not risky when you are extremely comfortable with the job, and what looks risky to someone outside of your static is actually extremely standard convention in your group. Ask most statics with a black mage all about it. And my static that I've made for Dragon Song's Reprise Ultimate has 2 extremely bleedingly edge talented melee and a black mage that is very, very talented as well, and what you see might make an everyday PF group crit their pants, for lack of a better phrase, so you can be greedy and it can be fine. But the question is, are you being greedy and actually have the neural prerequisite to execute it? And if you can't or don't, then you're honestly griefing a group that isn't practicing optimization runs, which is always sad to see. I've spoken previously on my channel about goals and aligning the goals with the rest of your group. That's where the big problem here is. One example is actually quite recent in my memory. Is recently a member of my static was helping a clear for one through UCOB where a party member of theirs wiped the group from griefing pretty close to the end. Did I say griefing twice? Greeting. I unironically actually said that. Freudian slip of the century, but I'm keeping it in. This is just one instance of that happening, and it's actually really quite sad. Another thing I disagree with is that parse runs do exist, and that's something that I actually think is great. If people genuinely enjoy that, my take is always, why not? Why do I need to feel the need to like police what people do or don't do? I don't. I'm way too busy in my own life to care. Is that frank enough for everyone? I am too busy in my real life between moves and marriages and shit. Like, miss me with it completely. I don't care. But what I'm trying to get at is specifically labeled parse run groups where everyone has the same goal and you know what you're going to be doing, which might involve wipes as you're executing those perfect fine-tuned maximum optimization strategies that are super exaggerated, and the party will wall when something goes wrong. That's the same goal, on the same page, that's fine. I take no issue with that. Some people do, I certainly don't. But enough of that. I want to first age myself from Zoomer all the way to Boomer and talk about parsing in the great old days of my time, and I was unfortunately a contributor to such degeneracy because in addition to Scholar, I was obsessed with Nocturnal Astrology until Square Enix decided to haul it to the guillotine and obviously make me sad. Explicitly me. It's all about me. Yes, me. Jokes aside, Ast and parsing used to go hand in hand. Many people might be alarmed at this, but Astrology used to play radically different than it does today. Back in the day, the balance card was the only card that straight up buffed damage. All the others had, like, not so amazing effects. Like, give an arrow to a ninja, watch them scream because, oh my god, my TP. But, and we're not talking about toilet paper at the start of but the balance effect was such a prominent effect, such a glittering star, that one Discord server actually named themselves off of it. Astrologians would go to the gold saucer machines and basically slot machine for this card however they could. May the RNG be ever in your favor. Thanks, Hunger Games. On top of that though, the Astrologian had the ability to burn a card to buff the effects of a card given an ability called Royal Road. This could raise the power level of the next card that they use significantly. Oh my god, the power level's over 9,000. Yes, I know. But now the balance raised your damage by 30% during its duration, which of course that is all still RNG, but this is why you would do multiple padded run attempts, and of course shuffle was a thing. But they could also extend the duration of the card's effects all the way from 30 to 45 seconds with time dilation, and then up to 55 seconds with celestial opposition. Totally worked different than it does today, guys, which led of course to that particular person doing so much wildly more damage that it was insane. These same people would then take this inflated number and then smack people upside the head with it and spitting on their so-called lessers. And that is inherently the problem, which we still see today, is people took an obviously false positive scenario that was unrealistic and used it as leverage over others to whatever petty end that they chose. Later, the introduction of concepts such as raid DPS, where you can take credit only for what you contribute, which also more fairly and accurately describes Bard and Dancer, as well as, I guess, every job with buffs. But the separation from R DPS to A DPS, which, to put what A DPS is briefly, is a good indicator of how you align your cooldowns and raid buff windows with your team. But with the separation of these statistics, things became a lot better. But my experience undeniably during Storeblood raiding was a toxic cesspit of shit, hence why getting me to speak about it is harder than trying to pull out my root canal that I had yesterday morning, and I genuinely quit and eventually came back, only for housing and crafting. I'm not even joking about that, guys. None of this was planned after that, to say the least, but if someone told me that I'd be talking about this on a bloody YouTube video years ago, like during patch 4.4 whenever I came back, I'd probably have intentionally avoided subscribing again because I hate this so much. But largely, the point though is that people took in obviously false positive scenarios that you know is not completely valid, that you know if you're doing it, you are probably fully aware what you're doing, and this unrealistic value, and use it as that leverage point over others. This situation still remains true today, but the techniques have obviously changed since the dance partner being fed ass cards won't skew our DPS, and it's a much more accurate statement. But here, I come from the world of healing, and so that is where I'm going to focus my discussion points on from here, because I think that it really highlights the problem here and the difference. First off is for the incredible majority of mechanics is that healers need to learn every single mechanic. No different different from anyone else. Obviously, there are exceptions like, oh, we can actually stand with the main group on the platform during P2S as the tank goes somewhere else and the DPS goes somewhere else. That is the exception, and you know it. This means the same thing that the summoner or the ranged physical or the tank needs to learn, you need to learn it too. Better suck it up. But they also get to ignore many tank mechanics like tank buzzers, obviously not the tank, but like the DPS, which usually you will have a healer have to learn that too. Brand new Living Dead being the first exception to that, because you can't ignore a Gunbreaker Super Belide, you cannot ignore a Home Gang from a Warrior. As much as people are like, oh, they'll heal themselves, okay, they will heal themselves, but what happens if they don't get healed enough and then they get whacked somewhere else? Like, you need to think about this thing as a healer, and DPS don't. If you don't have an invuln for a tank buster, which yes, in the current tier I realize you usually do, you need to brace for impact like Aquavale, Divine Benison and such, but even if they do use an invuln like Home Gang, you need a recovering plan for that, like I was getting at. Obviously that's not hard for any experienced healer. I'm not saying it's doctoral level medicine, but what I am going to say is that it is something a healer needs to worry about since the DPS does not. Now this obviously expands to things like mitigating raid-wide AoEs, healing up after them, spot healing someone that stood in bath, taking care of revives, and so much more. During progression, you're really learning 3 different layers of mechanics. The baseline mechanics, the healing, as well as catching people when they mess up, which yes, I 100% am going to say that that's a 3rd dimension, because you are really responsible for keeping everyone alive. And during progression, when people mess up, which is bound to happen because welcome to progression, that's your responsibility too. I'm obviously not saying that I'm the biggest brain person in the world because I have imposter syndrome like crazy, but what I am saying is that this takes any healer a lot more effort and attention to successfully prog than execute a striking dummy rotation. Obviously this changes every single fight, and obviously that even changes once you have the fight on farm, and then you and your co-healer know exactly who is using what and where, and once you're both familiar with who is using what and where, it becomes dramatically intensely easier. But during the earlier stages of prog is a shit show, and you know it. Here's another problem that you don't always hear about, especially if you're not healing yourself, but if you're healing then you are very aware of it, is that you don't always have a consistent co-healer. See, I've dragged my boyfriend out kicking and screaming to be my co-healer because, to be direct, I refuse to heal. I actually outright refuse to heal with someone that I can't communicate with, and I don't think that's a unfair thing to say. I'm pretty sure any healer that's honest with you would say the same thing, unless they're so desperate to the group that they're gonna be like, oh yeah, I'll just do this and this and this, and then you see the problem bubble up during prog and you're like, why are the healers over healing, why are they overlapping cooldowns, what the fuck is going on? Healer communication is key, and I do not exaggerate my feelings towards that, because one major reason, there's obviously more than that, like I was busy with real life, I had a group already and all these other things, but one major reason why I never went out to do the Epic of Alexander, in spite of it being the only current ultimate for literally 2.5 bloody years, that's longer than this channel, but I didn't want to do that with a different co-healer. I don't care if that's toxic, I don't want to heal with others that I just don't enjoy it. And most healers that you speak to, if they are totally honest, probably feel the same way about their static co-healer, and they will actually voraciously defend them to the death. My co-healer mine, keep away from them, snarling and growling and nipping at you if you dare. The co-healer relationship is very important and can definitely lead a static either to success or you're not going to have a static in a month, if you even make it that long. To say the least, healing has an incredible reliance on your 2 healers getting along and being able to communicate even without speaking to each other's flow. If their chemistry is off, your group will snap and crumble in content that is of any difficulty harder than P2S. But again, this makes the healing even harder. You and the co-healer need to have some like just non-verbal healing match, and if you have some weird passive-aggressive, oh, I'm trying to make the other co-healer overhealed or force them to hard carry my heals, it makes it significantly harder. I speak unfortunately from experience, and that's why I say what I do. I don't want to heal with another co-healer because I've done it. It's been good at times, but more than often than not really bad, because people are like, oh, I'm co-healing with blah blah blah, and then they take over the healing, or they make me totally heal. It's a shit show. So actually, while I was saying there were 3 layers of prog earlier, there's actually technically a 4th layer of prog, which is learning your co-healer. Been there, not fun, not fun to the extreme. Here I go off on this. I honestly could eagerly talk about this subject until I was blue in the face. Literally, this video, if I kept going, would be like 5 hours long. I kid you not, and I would not repeat a single damn thing I said. Going through that, this actually is probably something that many people picked up, is how this is relevant to parsing. And it should be clear, healer parses are the most busted, messed up, stupid parse number in this game at present. There's no role that even comes close to the skewed nature of healer parses during prog, and the baboon singing, slinging stool at healers during prog seem to be the most entitled, stupid, out of scope Karens on the planet. Because as stated before, there is so much to do as a healer during prog than just throwing out broils. Again, is pressing the one key the most riveting thing in the world? No. But during prog, you're gonna sure as hell be glad that's all you have to do during prog. Farm, totally different story, but that's a different topic. But in addition to that, a healer that has a consistent co-healer has an advantage. A healer that has a group that is very confident has an advantage because they're not going to mess up as much. A healer that has a group that actually uses mitigation is at an advantage. A healer like me on Scholar, or if I went on Astro, that uses raid-wide buffs will have a massive advantage if their team does well, or a tremendous disadvantage if they are not utilizing those buffs properly. And trust me, a difference between a good chain stratagem or a bad one, or good divination and card usage and bad divination and card usage, is very significant. This isn't even getting into the concept that has begun to form about healer parse parties, where one healer will literally take over every single last healing task, usually overgearing it, and make it so that the other healer can sink in every single energy drain, every single one. Just pop dissipation on cooldown, pop aether flow on cooldown, energy drain in the buff windows like crazy, and every single GCD into broil, which obviously takes that baseline normal expected healer parse and blows it through the sky into past the stratosphere into outer space versus reality, which is something that absolutely does bloat expectations from people who wouldn't know about this. And then you use your parse numbers like that are actually flying during prog, and then they use those numbers and whack you like it's a stick with it. Like, it's horrible. This is really like what I said at the start, is that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And that little knowledge is a dangerous thing is only actually cured with a significant addition of knowledge and energy and effort to genuinely understand these kinds of points. And I'm pretty sure this video won't even pass 2,000 views, which, means that I expect it to never actually happen. I expect this to keep going, unfortunately.